Well, today is Indigenous Peoples Day, a day to celebrate Native Americans and learn more about the people who lived here first, the land of whom we're living on right now. One way to do that, you can go to this website, Native Land. This essentially tells you whose land you live on, and it maps out the territories for various tribes around the world. And here in Washington, you might know names like Skagit, Snohomish, Muckleshoot. There is a lot more to learn about. And we're talking to the founder of Native Land. This is Victor Temprano this morning. Victor, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I've always been fascinated in this, having grown up in this area and knowing that we live on tribal land. In fact, Seattle named after Chief Sealth, the head of the Duwamish tribe. And when he essentially decided that they were not going to continue to wage war against the white man. I mean, he said essentially, you may have this land, you may inhabit it, but this will always be our land, and it still is. So talk about this project and how it got started.
Well, it got started about 6 or 7 years ago now, maybe even longer. But it got started basically as I was learning a lot more about the history of Canada. I'm not Indigenous myself, so as what we call a settler here as well, I didn't learn a ton growing up in school, learned a bit about hunter-gatherers kind of things, but growing up learning more about the history and about some of the difficult history, I wanted to both educate myself and educate other people, other settlers, so to create a resource that early on would start by just kind of being a way for people as an entry point for people to learn more about Indigenous territories, traditions, history, that sort of thing. And since then, it's grown a lot into a somewhat different project, but that was the beginning.
And to your point, it is not a pretty history. I mean, if you do some research on the Indian Wars, and I would highly encourage anybody to do that, it is not a pretty history. We look at the Seattle area and we see that we are Duwamish, we're still a Guamish, we have a Coast Salish territory here, some other areas overlapping as well. So why is that? Why the overlapping?
Yeah, so like the first thing to say is that it's not a finalized or legal or even an academic project. It's really based on representing as much as possible what different nations or different peoples that we talk to or that we have relationships with see as their own traditional territory. And the overlap is because we're not really trying to make some kind of nation map where all the borders line up perfectly, because that doesn't really make sense with the actual history or with how people see their own traditional territories, both in terms of how they were used in some cases. Sometimes people shared territories, sometimes people didn't. There's such a variety of history, but mainly that we're not about trying to make borders. We're just about trying to give each nation a bit of space to describe its own traditional territory, and it results in overlaps.
Victor, what do you hope people get out of this site, especially as non-native people learn about the history of the land here?
Yeah, I guess the ultimate goal would be that people start to have a bit more consciousness of Indigenous history, Indigenous people, that they're alive today, that there's lots of movement going on in Indigenous community. And for settlers, to learn more, become more educated, but also to start to access the wealth that is knowing about Indigenous history and culture, music, all that is very vibrant today. And sometimes we just don't even have access to it. But having access to it enhances everybody's life.
Victor Temprano, thank you so much. Thanks for all your great work. We appreciate it.
Right on. Well, thank you very much. Have a good day.
And I wanted to throw out a quote. This is from Chief Sealth. This is when he was basically saying that we will go to this reservation that you're putting us on. He says, "When the last red man shall have perished, and the memory of my tribe shall have become a myth among the white men, these shores will swarm with the invisible dead of my tribe. And when your children's children think themselves alone in the field, the store, the shop, upon the highway, or in the silence of the pathless woods, they will not be alone." So if you want to visit Native Land and you see whose land that we live on, you can check it out. We have a link at fox13seattle.com if you want to dive into that. 8:40.